Now I'm rolling, and I'm going to push the date and time. Okay, I've got 9:39 a.m. October 8th. Close enough?
Close enough.
Okay. Sure, glad to see everybody. I put an agenda out on top of everything. Underneath is about 12, 13 pages of Don Malick's excellent write-up of his experiences flying the LLRV, and I hope it's good bait for Jack Hoover to do the same. And we'll put both of those in the appendix of this NASA History Series publication. But I think Don set a high watermark for you.
Yeah, he did that.
You'll.
Hey Don, how about writing it for me?
He gave it to me on 17 pages of cut and paste, and it wasn't a digital file, so I finally got a gal in the other day, and she worked a couple hours and proofread it yesterday, and I think it's faithful to your original. First thing we ought to do is introduce everybody. And I got a couple of mics here we'll pass around because we are getting the tape of it. We hope we got a lot of stories. The only guy missing here that I'm really expecting is Barron. Bill Clark said he was going to be here, and so did Roger Barnaky and Joe Huxman from Tehachapi. He was on the rocket service crew down the rocket shop. But those are so far the absentees. The reason I know that so well is I've got a luncheon menu, and I'm going to pass it around, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different items on the menu, and all you have to do is check the item you like to have for lunch on this next to your name. I'll fax it over, and the food will be ready at 12:30. And it's a place about 4 blocks west of here called the Downtown Bistro. And we'll have our own room over there. And so we'll break up about 12:15, walk over there and have some lunch. Got some movies on the agenda here. You can just read that. I'm not going to go over it. It's pretty informal today. But I think the first thing we ought to do is, Doc,
yeah,
we start with that mic and just pass it down to the next guy.
Okay.
Tell us where you're living now. Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
You can either leave it in the stand or pick it out of the stand and then just pass it to Gene.
Okay.
But
fine.
tell us what you did on the program, where you're living now, and
okay.
a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is M.D. Doc Jenks, and I was the program engineer for General Electric, who, as you know, we modified the #1 bird and assembled the second bird, and also built a vertical test stand for the program. I've been retired from GE now 8 years, and I'm currently living in Bear Valley Springs, which is a private gated community just outside of Tehachapi. And it's sure great to see everybody gathered. And like I said just a minute ago, I can't believe it's been 35 years, but it sure has. I'll pass this down then.
Okay, I'm Gene Matranga. I started out with the original committee that talked about how do we support the Lunar programs back in the summer of 1961, I guess it was. And when we finally had a program, was named as the project engineer, and after we had finally checked everything out, they let Don Bellman go back to his job, so I picked up the job as program manager. Retired from NASA in 1979, went to work for Lockheed in the Skunk Works for about 12 years, and retired from Lockheed in 1991. I'm still living in Lancaster and doing a little consulting, and I'm finding that's interfering with my fun, so it's probably the last job I'm going to do. There you are.
Hi, I'm Jack Hoover. After I left the Lunar Lander program, I went on the program manager on a Cheyenne attack helicopter. As you all know, that got politically killed. And I went on from there. I retired in 76. So I've been retired since then. I came to live in Las Vegas. Worked for Hughes Aviation Services there, demonstrating and selling airplanes around. So enjoyed that for a number of years, and now I'm back to doing nothing and volunteering whenever I can.
Hey, Jack, for the young bucks that are here, tell them what you did on the LLRV.
On the Lunar lander, oh, that's right. I was pilot along with Malik and Joe Walker, and so I had a lot of fun doing that. Flew the 200 flight, which I got Gene a picture there, thanks to a gentleman standing up there in the middle in there. Anyway, that's what I did. It was a lot of fun, and I appreciated all the support and everything from all the people that are here. So, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Bruce Peterson. My association with the lunar landing thing was I did a lot of the initial simulation work with Cal Jarvis and Wilt Locke, and determining what fuel loads we needed, and I think from the basis of those simulations, that's what determined the fuel loading and the power required to do the job. Later on, I flew quite a few chase missions with a helicopter, chasing the LLRV and photographing the performance of the vehicle. I retired from NASA as Director of Safety, Reliability, and Quality Assurance in 1982. Went to work for Northrop on the B-2 for 12 years, and I retired from there about 6 years ago. And I do some consulting work, and that's about it now. Thank you.
I'm Mark Corbett. I worked with Bell Aerospace, now Bell Aerospace. I was the project engineer on the lift rockets and attitude control system. I retired in 1986, and I've done some volunteer work. That's what I do now.
All right, I'm gonna correct you, that was Bell Aerosystems in the
Bell
LLRV
Aerosystems.
days, and
Yeah.
later it became known as Bell Aerospace, but no longer exists.
No,
It, Textron dissolved it, I don't know how many years ago.
it's
And the
not-
reason I know that, I tried to get them to buy some tickets for us for the nice dinner, Textron, but who's Bill?
Okay, I'm Cal Jarvis, and I was the NASA systems engineer at the LLRV, and our job was to make the pilots look good when they tried to fly this thing. We did a pretty good job of that. So I've been retired from NASA for about 3 years now, and still live in the Antelope Valley area in Lancaster. So
Hi, I'm Don Malik. I'm a NASA pilot test pilot of 30 years. I started at Langley in '57 and transferred out to Edwards in 1963. And when I checked in out here, I had over 500 hours in helicopter and VTOL flight time back there, test time, plus other experience too. So when the LLRV was coming to be assembled and everything, Joe Walker called me and he said I was going to fly co-project pilot with him on the LLRV development. And I said, great, and that's what happened. I flew it for almost 2 years. And then the program was not really phasing out, but getting to the point where it was going to be turned over to Houston. Jack Kluger, who was assigned with us in Edwards, checked out in it, and he actually served as the IP to getting two of the Houston pilots up to speed. And I was assigned to other projects at that time. But it was a very unusual and impressive machine to fly, relying on a computer and people like Cal Jarvis to keep it going. But it was interesting. In a real short time, I developed quite a confidence, not only in the machine, but in the people. And the only thing that kept us from flying, other than the machine being ready, was hot temperatures. We had to have pretty cool temperatures to get it in the air and fly. But we did a lot of work. It was satisfying work, and I watched Neil land on the moon from Bishop, California, on a black and white TV that had the loudest reception in the world. But when they said they were down safely, why, that was a great feeling. Thank you.
Warren North. I started flying with NACA back in 1947 in the Lewis Laboratory, and went from there to headquarters and for a couple of years, and we started the space program, and then followed the astronauts after the selection. I was involved in one of the three gents that selected the first 7 astronauts, and then went to Houston with them, and spent about 28 years there with the first 4 or 5 groups of astronauts in the simulation division. The LLTV and the LLRV was certainly key in that whole operation. When Neil got back from that first flight, he said it felt like he'd been there before. Good testimony.
I'm Wayne Ottinger, and I'm your host today. We have 3 offices here in the front of the building under a nonprofit education firm called PAT Projects, and part of our education grant here last year was a project to write a NASA history series book on the LLRV, and we were very fortunate that Gene Matranga and Cal Jarvis offered to help us out with that, and we're hard into it now, and so we hope we can gather some more inputs and stories to go into that book. In fact, we're being ranked pretty hard by the NASA historian, Dr. Dill Henley, out there at Dryden, to get some human interest stories into this bill. Long, tedious, 200 pages of quotes on meetings and telecoms and memos and so forth. And we do have a number of stories that we've thought about, but we want to gather more. And so we've got copies to hand out for those that want to see the draft, but I thought everybody ought to have Don Malik's write-up. He did such a good job of summing it up. Anyway, glad you're here. Hope we have a good day, and I'll just pass it on.
Wayne, do you have a copy of the write-up to date for everybody to
Yes,
to
that's
look
what
at?
in this stack, the couple hundred pages we've done, and it does not contain Bill Hunley's editing, but that's immaterial because the basic core is there. I have, I guess, Art, you put in the flight logs in
Yes.
everybody's place?
Yes.
You all have flight
Yeah.
logs and Don Malik. So those are the 2 handouts, and these are optional. You can take these if you want, and realize we will be getting in these human interest stories and streamlining this as we edit it. And we're only about 60-70% done with this. If you see some stuff that's not in here, you realize we're just into it at this point. Okay,
Another comment on that,
Yeah.
Wayne, and that is what we tried to do is document the sequence of what happened. So as Wayne says, there's a lot of dates, there's a lot of people. Hundley doesn't like all the names that we've got in it, but I thought it was really important to make sure we did include the people that were involved in it. We did this from the NASA perspective because that's what we saw, and therefore I am really interested in what Art Gorby would have to say from the Bell perspective, and I'm interested in what people like you, Elmer, and you, Doc, would see from the GE perspective. And we really haven't gotten into the GE perspective yet.
Okay.
We've just gotten into the first flights and the checkout of the vehicle, and that's all still to be written, which
Okay.
we'll get done in the next month probably. So
Good.
the thing we're really looking for is to give a balanced description of this thing and make sure everybody gets credit for what they did in supporting it.
I think to that end, I've heard some stories recently from Dean Grimm, Warren, that I'd like later today to get your inputs on, but it certainly puts a different twist and a spin
Yeah.
on, I mean, we looked at this from one standpoint as the developers of it, but you as the customer and the end user of it. I think from what I hear from Dean, it's very interesting, and we ought to put that in the book. Go ahead, Elmer.
Okay, I'm Elmer Smooch, and I worked with GE during this. In fact, I hired in at GE. I was only there about 2 weeks, and they said, we're going to send you over to NASA for a couple of weeks. About 2.5 years later, but I was just a 21, 22-year-old kid. I was in awe and intimidated by all you guys at the time. But I was in kind of design, drafting, and configuration control of the vehicle. And look back and enjoyed every minute of it. So it was a good time.
I'm Marv Woodcock. I was instrumentation engineer for GE, and I retired from GE in '91. Still live in Lancaster.
Okay. And if you want to put that mic in the stand, and then I think at this point we've got 3 different videotapes on the LLRV, plus we got several more, and we could have video from here until tomorrow at this time without stopping.
That's correct.
So we won't do that quite because we want to talk too. But maybe we ought to cut loose and first off, is the menu passing around?
Yeah.
Good. So I'll fax that over as soon as everybody's got their check on it. I'll go ahead and start the video, and then we'll stop after a bit and talk some more and go back and forth as it seems appropriate. Is that all right with everybody?
You won't be taking any more pictures in, Lee, because I'm gonna have to move around and see the screen better.
Yeah, I gotta move too, cause
Mike?
try to get all you.
Of course, we don't know what the editors did, right, Tony?
Not a thing, not a clue. Didn't leave
We
any.
could have a mix.
Didn't leave any notes or anything.
We could have a mix here.
That's with lift rockets, so
Yeah,
that has to be
little boost.
a little subsequent flight.
Broke
I
the
remember-
ground.
I remember Joe complaining on one of those early flights, like 4 or 5, that the jet engine just really wasn't getting it done, so he gave it a jab with a rocket.
But we replaced that rectilinear blast shield with a circular one about 2 feet in diameter and stuck it in with a bolt in the center. And that was solved our cable flopping problem.
This is the first one?
No,
This is,
that's probably flight 6 or somewhere in there. He started doing some large angle maneuvering. In the flight log, we've got some comments about when he did first things.
When did you take the wheels off?
Flight 11,
Was it? Okay.
You did nail that.
I nailed that
Good.
explicitly.
I've been after Tony to try and nail it off of video logs, but we
It was after flight 11 and for flight 12.
okay.
Flight 11 was the last one with the casters.
I would have thought we'd have had them off within the first 3 or 4 flights, but that's what research does for us. It
Right.
sharpens our memory.
And not a lot of the flights were marked on the films, what
Right.
they were. I think the first flight was the first one we saw here.
Yes, it was.
We've been putting through its paces.
Well, it took almost 37 flights to check out all the systems. It was a fairly extensive time period. And it was only after that that we went into what we call the research. We did some simulated lunar landings for demonstration for the press and for Jim Webb when he came out. But the way Walker did that was he set the engine throttle for what he thought was about 5/6 of the weight of the vehicle and then used the lift rockets, but it was not with the automatic system.
You gotta join us.
It's really strange to have no audio, isn't it?
Right.
To watch it this way.
You can't hear the rockets popping.
I know.
Well, actually, you guys probably can.
In memory.
Yeah,
There may
we
be audio
certainly
on the
can.
film, they just didn't transfer it.
can see some shakiness in some of the early flights as we improve things. You can see it's a lot solid, lot more solid in its ability to control.
Looked like it wobbled a lot during that first one.
Yes, right.
Looked like a lot of fun.
Well, there's a relay failure on the first flight, so we wound up with twice as many of the Attitude rockets firing as we had planned to have. So that's why you had the little extra boost on everything. Plus the fact that nothing was optimized.
Yeah, I might just do that.
That instrumentation package on the back was standing up at first. Did it
You're
fly
right.
that way?
Yeah.
We never did fly with it standing up, did we?
I don't think so.
I think that we made that very early on.
You can see you used lift rockets on that one.
Yeah, yeah.
He really jumped. It was either that or burning fuel off.
No, he did that, and he found out that the radar altimeter locked up on him when he did that because it wasn't geared to be able to respond to that kind of rapid takeoff. It's a cold day though. You can see the rockets
you sure can.
really firing.
Water condensing.
That's the lift rockets with big steam.
Mm-hmm.
The big steam is the lift rockets. Yeah.
Mr. Kluber?
Jack?
What was it, I've talked to Mr. Malik a lot about what it was like flying this thing. I was wondering, I've never had the opportunity to talk to you, what was that like?
You mean, what was, I don't understand your question, what was
Flying
it?
flying this thing, what was that like?
Flying it was a lot of fun. It was a big thing you had to learn different was when you went into lunar simulation, you could get the attitude of the vehicle immediately, but getting any reaction going on simply because of the difference in the gravity. I always said if you tilt the helicopter 5 degrees, you get a certain acceleration on it. So to go into lunar simulation where that lift vector is only 1/6 of it, you've got to go 30 degrees to get the same acceleration. And like I say, you could get the attitude immediately, but nothing like we did the 180-degree turns. That same thing, you just sat there and were patient and waited, that's all.
Had to do a lot more anticipating.
Yes, you had to do it earlier
Right.
because you knew you had a wait period that
Right.
whole thing.
And that was one of the things that the astronauts learned, so that they could put that anticipation in. It didn't come naturally.
Why did you have to do that? Because of the inertia of it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Same thing, you only got that lift vector that's responding to everything going out, so you had to put it in and then sit and wait for it to take effect. And that's why I say the difference between flying it was one of patience, waiting the thing to happen. As far as making landings and takeoffs, when you used that lift stick and the rockets, it was instantaneous. It was a piece of cake to put it down like you're putting down on eggs.
Don, this looks like your first flight.
Yeah, I flew some of the early flights in the orange suit, and then I decided to go to the green for just the difference, see the difference in the pilots and the flying. Joe always wore the orange, and I started off with it, and I switched to green, so most of the flying I did in the green suit. But this must have been one of the early ones.
By the way, Ray White's gonna try and meet us at the restaurant.
I was gonna say, wasn't that White the crew chief?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ray's
right.
he had to be in LA this morning. He's trying to get back in time to meet us at the lunch.
Good.
I remember those wheels being such a pain that
With any crosswind, as soon as you got the
Yeah,
engine
you got light.
lifted up a little bit, you
take
started to move.
I remember chasing those flights.
We saved a little weight on putting those dish foot pads on
Yeah.
instead of those casters
Yeah.
too. And we had Willie Wilson draw us a sketch of the ballast cans that fit on each leg strut. There was a lightning hole and a horizontal member near the oleo strut, and you just put some lead shot in the BB shot in the cans, And that would account for the weight difference between Jack and Don, and, or Joe. So, we'd, screw those ballast cans onto the legs, and that would balance it out.
What about the ejection seat? Was that carefully tailored for each of the three?
Yes.
There was an
Seat
insert in
cushions.
the seat that was tailored to each pilot so that the center of gravity for the thrust vector was properly aligned.
All your pilots and astronauts had to go to Weber and Burbank and get swung in the CG fixture, and then they would take those measurements, calculate the height of the seat cushion, and put their name on it, and then as they would change their body CG over time, they'd retest them periodically, and they get a new seat cushion. And Don has a nice account of that in his write-up. It caused him to have a, as he calls it, eye-watering experience,
Yeah.
I think, quote.
Because when the girls were involved?
Well, he talks about that too. He talks about the girls too, but yeah, that'll encourage you all to have to read Don's account of his experiences. And those are the kind of stories that Dale Hunley would like us to collect.
You didn't have to pitch much to travel forward or back, did you?
Not with the jet engine locked,
But with it unlocked.
but with it unlocked, you had to have all this anticipation.
Yeah, the engine lock, it was like very powerful BTOL, you tipped it, that went. But, once you're in
Yeah, I
there.
thought you had to move, you had to pitch it a lot more.
Well, you do with the engine unlock.
Yeah.
And
In
in
the lunar
the
simulation,
you have to pitch it a lot to get it to move.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
If you get it over 30 degrees, you only got 15 more than 45, so then it's equal in each direction, so.
And you got a lube system problem on the engine if you get it tilted too far. I've forgotten what the angle was, but it was constrained. Well, we got through our first tape.
How about that?
Get some light.
Bounces a few
When-
times,
when-
rolls.
When the wind was blowing especially, because, as I say, when he got a reasonable amount of engine thrust, the wind would cause him to start to drift before he was ready to fly.
Yeah, I was nervous just watching it from, I was flying the helicopter.
It'd been all right if he had brakes, but he didn't have any brakes on it.
Didn't have any brakes.
That's right.
Free wheel, you touch the other side, or things, you can't see it, or anything, you just move with it.
I did that and it might have blown right into me.
Hey Wayne, I wanna correct something on that skiing incident. My part in it was going down and checking the skis out from from the base.
Oh, it was?
Oh yeah, that's it.
Who's flying a helicopter that day?
I hope you flew the helicopter. I was going to.
Okay.
Well, the way I
He
heard
never
this,
got that far.
the way I heard the story was that, when Venzel looked out the window, the chopper was ready to start pulling the mill.
Oh, we were walking out there getting everything all ready to go.
Oh, okay, so you weren't in the area
We hadn't cranked it up yet.
Is it true you're gonna take him out in the middle of the lake and drop the rope?
for today.
That day it happened to me, and that day.
That is the,
Cheating.
I got a question.
No, we'd have to ask Milt that.
I thought there were too many instruments in the.
Had you heard about the story
In
more?
the compartment
Water
to
skiing?
watch. Too many warning systems and too many instruments.
They had
Anybody
several
feel like
inches
that?
of water on the lake bed, and Milt wanted the water ski.
Had more than that.
And Jack's
Probably
A lot more than that.
8 or 10 inches is the minimum, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of
10
water.
inches, a lot of water. And so Jack Kluber was
But
gonna
even
tow
without the
Milt.
water, the mud was,
He
anytime
was
the
gonna
mud was
fly a
there, it was
helicopter and tow Milt
grease.
on the water.
That's right.
And Venzel, which reminded me, when you talked about being at Lewis, wasn't Venzel up there at the same time you were?
He left just before I started flying.
He left just before.
Have golfers and.
Well, there's a photograph in the back room, and it's one that was presented at Joe Venzel's retirement party to one Colonel Kluber. And I can remember your wife coming after me pretty viciously after she saw the caption on it. And it's the dummy laid out, and everybody's got their back on him walking away. from the ejection seat test, and I put a caption on it and said, "Oh, well, he's just an Army pilot."
I saw that.
So it's sitting in the back room here.
But due to that Army pilot, we got the big ejection seat, that saved
Well,
man's lives.
and I wanna get the record straight. As I recall it, Jack, you and I spent quite a lot of our energy in trying to convert people, and I don't remember a lot of resistance. But I just remember you and I going to meetings with Bell together and down at Houston and Weber, and our mission was get that emergency rocket system off and get that new 50% more impulse in that rocket on the ejection seat. And the logic was, we didn't think, and Bruce, can you speak to this as far as, and Don? How much time did it take you to practice the emergency recovery with the lift rockets and the drogue chute on the fixed base simulator? Did you spend a good deal of time trying to thread the needle as far as?
No, I think we ran a few and we said, this is no way.
So you weren't gonna use it anyway?
No, as far as using the extra lift rockets,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I think what we decided was we'd probably bust our ass 11 out of 10 times.
11 out of 10?
So we relied on the seat.
So no wonder Jack and I had such a good, easy time selling that idea.
Well, you remember we called a safety meeting on the thing because each pilot had his own. Could he make it 51%, 52%, or 48% or 46%? Said, wait a minute. If you went into lunar simulation and you started burning peroxide, the only way to go is out.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't enough to make it on.
To make it
even
home.
on the best cases, you wouldn't make it most of the time. So for a big percentage of the time, someone said, hey, we aren't gonna use them, and all they are is dead weight. So if you're going to Houston with it, you want them out there because you don't want them making the decision. If it goes, you pickle. When there's no decision, that's your decision. It's already made for you. Otherwise, depending on like Don's ego there, whether you try to make it or not. And so that was the case. Just make it one way so there's no decision. And that's what you and I were putting out.
Anyway, that was a revolution for the rocket designers to get rid of 6 out of 8 rockets on that machine. And simplify it, get it down to 2. And we probably saved a couple of $100 anyway, and I expect we got.
That in the parachute package.
Yeah, the drogue chute. And we got photographs of the first time we tried to test that drogue chute. It wouldn't come out. And the bent up metal was pretty impressive down at El Centro. I remember being down there for it.
Yeah, they ran 6 tests before they finally got everything ironed out to what we considered to be satisfactory.
Yeah.
They'd only figured they were going to do 4, and they wound up doing 6.
I mentioned earlier about a perspective from our standpoint out here and living with this thing through the design and development of flight deck. Talking to Dean Grimm here recently, I know how it came up. I've been talking to Tom Stafford and Pete Conrad, several years ago. And I can't remember which one I can attribute the comment to, but it's something about, man, we wanted to chain those suckers to the ground as soon as we could down there. They were so dangerous. And
They got some respect for him. That's for damn sure.
anyway, I was telling Dean Grimm about it, and he said, well, let me tell you a story. And it was on the day that Neil did his final training for Apollo 11. And they'd gotten 6 flights in on that day, which was an unusually high number.
That's a flight unported the tank.
No, this was 2 weeks before. 2 weeks before the launch on Apollo 11. So this was sometime, this would have been in early July, okay, of '69. and they had gotten the 6 flights in. Neil was happy. He's ready to go. So Dean said he sent everybody home to celebrate. But he hung around because he knew General Phillips was going to be calling in because they had a flight readiness review 2 weeks before the launch date, and Phillips was en route to the Cape on his airplane. And he called Dean to find out how it went that day. And Dean told him, he said, well, we got 6 flights in today and Neil's happy. And Phillips' response was, well, if Neil can do it in that piece of junk, then I guess we better get our act together and get going.
That doesn't sound like Phillips to me.
Anyway, may have been some ad lib by Dean there, but according to Dean, he called it a piece of junk. But
Hard to believe.
anyway, I'll hand you the mic and you give us a perspective from your standpoint of the RV and its impact on your training operation.
My memory isn't as good as Don's are, that's for sure, but I can remember coming out here and talking to who was had a flight at that time.
Pencil, Walker was chief pilot.
Probably Joe Venzel.
Pencil, probably.
There was never any problem at all between our group in Houston and Dryden. I think when Max Paget got wind of it, he had some misgivings, and I wasn't too involved in that. But as far as my group at Houston was concerned, in the flight crew, I realized this was a vehicle that they had to bet on, because it wasn't going to be an easy job landing that airplane on the moon with many variables that weren't resolved at that point. So we looked at this RV-TV combination as the forerunner of the LEM. I was wondering what technology bled directly from the RV and TV into the Lunar LEM in terms of instrumentation, or realize the hardware was all different, but there had to be some displays in the cockpit that were similar, I would suspect.
About halfway through the program, Warren, Don Cheatham provided us with drawings of the actual LEM cockpit arrangement, and we manufactured tape instruments to duplicate those planned for the LEM. Our instrument shop actually manufactured instruments
On the RV.
on the RV
Yep.
to the LEM design.
Yep.
And in fact, we got a side stick, that Neil had used in Gemini 8, which you recall posed a problem for him with the Agena. And
Graham claims it's Gemini 4, and
Gemini 8.
okay.
His memory is one thing, mine is Gemini 8. 'Cause
I just
remember-
watched the film.
Pardon?
I just watched the film. It was Gemini 8.
Yeah.
I
And
can vouch for that.
and we rewired the stick and found that there were some problems in the manufacture of the stick that created the problem for Neil. But nonetheless, we installed the instruments and the stick in the RV and used those, and the pilots pretty well found those acceptable displays, the arrangement, the scale, and all the rest of it seemed to work pretty good. The other thing we did was there was always a question between the VTOL people and what we were finding in our simulations, what you were finding in your simulations down in Houston, as to what the control power ought to be. The VTOL people thought we were crazy going with the low control powers that we had. And our simulation showed it was satisfactory, and in fact the vehicle proved that it was satisfactory. And it's an interesting situation in retrospect that people like Drinkwater and Anderson up at Ames and Jack Reeder and some of the others, Tapscott at Langley, tried mechanizing the rate command in the helicopters and the V2L vehicles, and in retrospect said, hey, this really works. They were terribly skeptical when we were doing it, but we in essence confirmed the proper control power, the proper feedback parameters for the LEM.
Good, that's what I thought was the case, and I'll make sure that,
And we worked very, very closely with Don Cheatham. Don Cheatham was our real point of contact on this stuff with your group
from Grumman into,
and with Grumman, right. He provided the interface then with Grumman for those parameters. We also had fairly good interface with a gentleman named Dave Gebhardt at Grumman, who had done an awful lot of their simulation work. So he came out here several times and watched flights, talked with our people to make sure that that got fed back to the Grumman people. He was Grumman flight test engineer.
Tom Kelly, thought a lot of that LLTV and LLRV.
A question for you, and it's a question that Bill Huntley asked me, and I didn't know the answer. I know you provided the funding for buying the vehicle. Did you all also provide the funding for the original study that we did in January of '62? Do you remember?
I was reading that in this report that Wayne sent me, and I wasn't too close to the funding shifts. I know that Gilruth and Williams and I were the main pushers to help you folks get the funds you wanted, but who struck first?
Well, as I say, I know for the vehicle design and the fabrication, your people did fund it, but I couldn't remember who provided the original $70,000 study money, and I can't find anything anywhere that gives me a better clue to that.
The idea started here, that was the main thing.
Oh yeah, no question about it. Well, actually it started at Bell. We had an idea, but Bell was a lot further along with the idea than we were.
I was a little surprised at that when I read it. You were part of that original team at Bell. Great.
Ken Levin, I understand, headed up a preliminary design group at Bell, and Deckerville thought that that Riken was a member of it, and I haven't been able to get back to Riken yet to confirm that.
Yeah, I think it was.
Riken at that time had a design analysis group or something.
Right.
But I know we've got a copy of the patent here, and it was issued in June of '63, and it wasn't until May of '63 they moved the cockpit down in front of the engine from up on top. And with the cockpit up on top, the JP4 tank was in a toroidal tank around the engine. And that sucker sat way up there. I mean, that was 25, 30 feet tall. I'm so glad we never had to fly that thing, because the tip over on it would have been really fantastic. You guys would have been scared to get up in the cockpit.
Thank you very much.
Well, the radar altimeter, I recall, was directly related to the lunar module. It wasn't in any way.
No, we separately purchased the radar altimeter from Ryan Electronics, and I don't remember who provided the one for the LEM, but they were not the same, that I remember. It was a question of whether we should install the LEM hardware on the vehicle, and everybody said that really didn't matter since we weren't using it in a closed loop function in any way, so that really wasn't important. There was also a suggestion by the Grumman people that we install the hypergolic attitude system that the LEM was going to use on the LLRV. And your management said that isn't anything that's really worthwhile doing, that as long as we had the right control parameters, it wouldn't matter whether it was the peroxide system or the hypergolics. I have documentation of that.
A little better breathing too.
Yes, right. Well, we'd had to change tankage, we'd had to change plumbing, it would have been a big complicated mess to have to implement. And nobody felt it was worth the cost and the time it would have taken, because we were pushing hard to try to get these things out to you by the original delivery date was expected to be September of 1966. That was the goal. And we actually finished most of the flying by September of '66. And then we put in a series of flights in December just to verify that the changes we had made to the vehicle were adequate before we actually shipped the vehicle to you in January of '67. And of course, we had a team with Jack as the pilot to go actually fly it in Houston in February of '67, to demonstrate that the vehicle had not changed between what we had flown at Edwards and as it was being given to you at Houston.
The first pilot at Houston was Al Grady.
I'm sure it was.
Yes, yeah, Joe did the original one.
You checked him out.
Right.
Ed Edwards
Well, sure.
and Bud Green, both of them.
Both Joe and Bud got flights out here and checked out. But Jack made the first flight at Ellington
Okay.
to prove that the vehicle got reassembled and was okay.
So we did 5 flights that day.
Yeah, we did, I
At
don't
Ellington?
remember. At Ellington, I don't remember.
Wish I could have been there. I understand you put on a heck of a show, Jack.
Mhm.
One of the, I think the most critical thing that probably research contribution to the LEM was the low control power authority. Wouldn't you?
Well, that and the attitude and the fact that you had to have so much more anticipation for maneuvering.
Yeah,
Those were the two big factors.
but I'm talking, okay, that's more of piloting.
That's piloting.
Whereas the
Technically,
design
the control
for the
system
control
parameters.
system would be the control system parameters.
Yes,
And particularly with respect to the low control authority.
right.
And there's something else that needs to be mentioned, and that is that since we, thank goodness, required an ejection seat and wouldn't allow a pilot to stand up like they were in the LEM and fly this trainer, or we wouldn't have had 3 people here today. The distance from the instrument panel was 5 or 6 times as to what it was in the LEM from the eye of the pilot to the panel, because they were standing up real close to the panel. So all of our instruments had to be scaled way up in size, because your eye was way back from the distance. So that's why everything had to be custom made out of Edwards.
Was there a move to put the guy in a vertical position?
No, it was ruled out.
We looked at that, and Yankee had a system that they claimed would have
Pulled the pilot out?
pulled the pilot out, but we didn't think that was a very good idea.
See, that was before the Yankee system being flown in Vietnam, right?
Right.
Because that worked very good in Vietnam.
Did it?
This was in the mid-'60s. That's
Yeah.
before we were really deep into Vietnam.
We tried to get that Yankee system put in the shuttle after the regular SR-71 seats came out. Wish we had them now in Challenger. Could have saved a few guys.
Had you had the Yankee system aboard the Challenger?
If we had.
If you had it. One thing, in the front end of this book, I've got a note, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but I had heard coming into the program in late '62, looking at things, of course Gene had been working on it long before, but that this was, the actual landing task was the most challenging manned task in the mission.
That's for sure.
And is that true from the
Oh, yes.
perspective
Oh, yes, certainly we had it in the fixed base also, as you know, but wouldn't compare to the LLTV RV.
but the actual Apollo mission, of all of the tasks that the pilot had to train for, the landing was the toughest, most challenging.
Well, Max Vijay saw that because most of the rest of it was automated. The landing was really the only thing that he controlled manually, isn't it?
That's right. Well, the docking, of course, was.
That's true, the
was
docking.
manual, but all of it was manual. And we had backup modes for even the asset. If something had gone wrong to take over.
Anyway, I thought we ought to cover it in our introduction and make that statement,
Yeah,
just to set, have a mindset
That's
for
a
the
good point.
reader. And then we'll hope Neil will back it up in his forward, from his perspective. He's agreed to do the forward to the book, so that's another timeline. We're trying to get this thing out to him by early November,
That's good.
the latest.
You'll do a good job.
Warren, I have a couple very specific questions, if you can answer them for me. Early in the program, as this thing was set up, we had a Navy captain assigned to be the headquarters program manager for this. His name was Van Ness. Do you happen to remember what his first name was? All I have is the last name.
I got his initials in here.
Jack Van Ness? Okay.
He and I worked together a couple of years at headquarters before I went to Houston.
Okay. Also showed in some of the memos that Tom Baker was instrumental in providing us with some of the funding to do this. Do you remember what role Tom Baker was playing down at Houston?
That name doesn't ring a bell.
Okay. Tom had worked at Dryden before he went down to Houston, and I don't know specifically what his position was. Another name that falls into that category is Jack Heberly, who also we had talked with money-wise.
Jack was Gilruth's right-hand man in the Space Task Group at Langley, and came out to Houston with us. And it wasn't long after he got there that he transferred to IBM. So he left
NASA.
NASA fairly early on after we transferred to Houston.
Okay, well, he provided some of the original money for the design study. He was the interface that we had for that. Another name that crops up in 1964, the Manned Spacecraft Center set up a steering committee to coordinate the activities between Dryden and MSC. And I've got Dick Day as the chairman of the committee. I've got Dean Grimm designated the project engineer, Neil Armstrong representing the astronauts, Don Cheatham representing the technical interface.
He was in the spacecraft in the program office, not in contrast operations.
Okay, Cheatham was in space.
He's in the Apollo program office.
And the other name I have is a D.L. Teagarden.
Don Teagarden, he was also in the program office.
Okay, was he a financial guy or was he a technical guy? Do you remember?
Technical, I think.
Okay.
I just found an org chart, Gene, and it has Captain H.E. Van Ness.
We called him Jack.
Called him Jack, okay, at least we got it all. Now, the historians should be happy,
Yeah, we'll
not
say
only initials, but his nickname.
H.E. Jack,
Yeah, H.E. Jack.
just like M.D. Jack.
That's it, that's right.
Okay,
Hey,
yeah, that's right, Abel Leach.
you might want that. There might be some
I-
other people on
I
it.
think I have this. I
You
didn't
do?
realize
You
that,
didn't, okay.
I gave that to you.
Oh, okay.
That came out of one of the program plans. Okay, so, that's great.
For those that haven't seen the early configuration, just to remind you, that's what that looked like.
With the pit on top.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
As this is general comment for everybody, as you go through this flight log that Wayne provided, there are some holes toward the end of it, particularly on who flew when, and some of the operation dates. I've got some holes in that I can't identify. So if anybody has any information that could fill those in, we'd really appreciate it. Otherwise, we're just gonna have to
That's Jack and I.
leave them blank. Another general comment that El Grande flew 13 flights out at Edwards, Warren, and Bud Ream flew 12. And that was the plan, was to give them about 12 flights in the machine out at Edwards. And those were all flown late summer of 1966. Al Grante's first flight was in August of '66, and we got him his flights, and then Ream flew his flights. Last flights for them were September of '66.
Warren, getting all the astronauts that flew to the moon landing were checked out in helicopters, were they not?
By golly, they should have been. I'm trying to remember how much time they got, but that would have been up to Al Grande to make that recommendation.
Well, you know how we got Joe into helicopter training, or do you?
No.
Well, we were playing handball one day over in the gym, and said, Joe, you're getting close to first flight, don't you think you ought to get some helicopter time? Because it's attitude flying. And we said, well, I fly attitude all the time. Said, yeah, but you got motion cues going by all the time, and it's different when you don't have any motion going. So he's helicopters are no problem. Said, well, I'll go over to the Army and borrow a helicopter tomorrow, and then we'll go out on the lake bed and we'll see if it's a problem. Which we did. You remember that?
What date was that, Jack? Do you remember the month or the year? Must have been 16.
Well, it was right before.
It had to be the summer or early fall of '64.
64, right. That's when it was.
Yeah.
See, I left to go back to Command and General Staff College. That's why you got more time then, more flights in than I did then. But anyway, so we got the helicopter, went out there and got it on the lake bed and showed him how, the rotor tips and how that's how you go and how you control it with the stick. And we did it sitting on the ground, the whole thing. And then we got up in the air. He was having a little problem with it, as most people would. And I could see when he got white knuckles on the stick, he wasn't going to go any further. And that's when he said, "I've had enough. Let's go back over to the thing." Of course, it didn't help that I was laughing at the same time. So this was on a Thursday, and I took the helicopter back over the Army, drove back over, and Joe was gone. It was quitting time, so I left off there. Come in on Friday, asked, "Where's Joe?" No answer of where Joe was. And, came in on Monday, didn't know Joe, and Vincent said, "Hey, you gotta go down and talk to Pickle about that." So, okay. So that's when I got into Pickle, and he laughed, and he said, he came in so disturbed after your flight out on the lake bed that he's now down in Pensacola going through helicopter school.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so that's how we got
That
into
was
that.
before June of '64, because I was over at the test pilot school and I missed that. When I came back from the school, Joe was back, and that's when we leased the chopper, plus we
Yep,
leased the
leased
instructor
it.
pilot, McCarthy, Bill McCarthy, and he stayed with us both and flew more on the chopper then. But I hadn't even realized Joe had gone through the Navy school.
He used,
Oh, yeah.
he used, coming into work, he based it at Fox Field, and then he got an hour of practice coming in each morning and an hour going back,
Yeah.
going home with the thing.
He also got a little practice hauling tractor fuel to his neighbor, I think.
I don't think we'll mention that. But that's a good story.
But we always said that that's why all the lunar lander people, the astronauts,
I'm trying to
all got
recall
checked out in helicopters before.
where they would have done that.
Well, you guys had a
You had a
Bell
helicopter.
47G 3B down there.
I can't believe they didn't, because Al Granny and Reamer both fell out of Langley before they hit down there with a lot of helicopter
Yeah.
time, so I'm sure they were running those guys.
So you get, the difference with the helicopter is you don't have to, you have to wait for the reaction to come on, and that's why you use the lower control power you talked about. It's because the reaction was instantaneous as far as your feeling when you asked for the rocket for power, it was there, so you didn't have to wait, plan ahead that way.
Well, at that time, I was supposed to be a LLRV pilot, and I asked Joe, I said, can I check out the helicopter? There was no argument whatsoever from Joe, because he'd been through that thing, so that's how I got checked out of the helicopter. And then Don came along, and Jack came along, who had a lot of helicopter time, so they got selected as the LLRV pilots, and I went into the lift and buddy pilot program at that time.
Yeah, they got there about March of '64, and then they had to send me back to Fort Leavenworth to go through the staff command.
Well, not to prison.
Not to prison.
Oh, okay.
Went by it every day, didn't check that out.
I'm looking for dates. You said Joe was out here in '64, right? That doesn't show here.
His first flight was, October 30th of '64.
No, you're talking about Walker's first
That's
flight.
green.
You're talking about Algrani.
That's 66.
56, okay.
Yeah, summer '66. They flew at the, we had essentially finished the research program, when they checked out.
Now, I assume that
Yeah, you
Houston
don't
had
have-
their own fixed base simulator
You don't
for the
have
LLTV, right?
in here, you've got this.
Who is
Okay,
this?
so you had helicopter time required, fixed base
I show a
simulator
flight here,
time
I show a
required,
flight here.
and that CG fixture,
These-
so it's off the top.
Let me show you why that came
So
out
they had
the
to
way
get all
it
three
did.
approved before they could go on that flight.
I'm not,
We got a flight the 19th of October there. Or September,
August.
August rather, yeah, August 19th. Hi, Joe.
You see, the reason those came out the way they did, Jack, is look, look,
Oh,
look,
yeah, they are up there, yeah.
I had postings in here, cause I didn't know the stuff that filled in here, so whoever typed it, just type that.
I see.
So that's the reason this stuff shows out here.
All right.
Take one of these.
Yeah.
I want you to, I'm gonna find you a page to read that identifies with what you wrote up in your write-up. And it's a different version, I mean, it's a different perspective, Don.
is what you sent me the same as that?
Yeah. I think it might be a little bit. Page 29, Don. And, whoops, I'm sorry, it would be in the back. There's, each chapter has its own pagination system. So it's the last chapter, page 29, and that's in the 6th chapter. So it's right near the back of the book.
I didn't read this thoroughly, but you don't go into any of the ejections at.
We do.
We
do
haven't
wanna-
gotten that far,
Yeah,
Warren.
we wanna get into that and, tell us what we'll tell you what we know, and we want you to give us your version, and we'll get, I understand that we can, through, some other people, I've forgotten who was your accident investigator, that worked for Joe down there. Was he pilot? Dean mentioned his name. I'm working with both Dean and Ron Blythe.
Larry would be the one.
So, we'll hope to get some additional records on that. This one I'm talking to Don about, Don has a nice write-up about taken a lesson learned from Joe Walker's demo flight for the AIAA conference, which was done on the NASA ramp behind the hangar.
Turns out to have been the X-15 conference.
It was an
It was
X-15,
for the X-15 conference. I had,
not an AIAA.
not AIAA.
Did we ever fly for the AIAA?
I don't remember, I don't show anything that says AIAA, but it talks about the 3 flights we made up at Dryden in support of the X-15 conference.
I wonder if the X-15 conference could have been a subset of an
It
AIA
may
in
have-
LA, and this was just a little field trip for them.
It may have been, I don't know.
I suspect that's what it was. Anyway, Cal's memory was that we had scheduled the trajectory towards the hangar.
Yeah, I vividly remember that.
And,
That we did,
Yeah, that was the,
that we did.
well,
Towards the building?
no,
buildings.
Yeah, that's what.
well, I say we set up so that he would come in and fly parallel to the back of the building.
Yes,
Because it would never, I don't think, approve a flight plan that would allow him to fly into the building.
right.
Which is probably why you don't remember it that way.
He was set to land right where they parked the 104 at Wicked
Yeah,
Hill.
right.
But
But as I recall, he came in parallel to the buildings, but he did have this problem, which you accurately described of locking the gimbals and coming on in, boarding his lunar sim.
Right,
But
remember that.
we remember,
And it specifically is Flight 47.
okay.
I have identified the flight.
What, Cal had done a good job of writing up, a lot of the detail on it, but I added a few more from my memory, and that was that the XB-5A that Ryan had been flying had a fatal crash just a few weeks prior to this demo flight.
not being sure.
And one of the contributing factors to that XB-5A fatal crash was the pilot was reaching in the back for a switch that he couldn't find easily. And it was during a critical transition maneuver.
He turned off his attitude control system, is what he did.
Is that what he did?
Turned the wrong switch off.
Well, I heard he got a flight suit cuff caught on a switch.
Well, maybe that's what whatever it was,
Yeah.
it turned the attitude control system
Right.
off and he had no control.
I watched him crash.
Yeah, so did I.
Anyway,
Parachute didn't work, the
we
sheet didn't work.
had been having a problem with
It
our
got out, but the sheet didn't,
weighing system on our
family was there watching.
lunar sim mode. And if you came on too fast with the lift rocket stick, it would weigh the LLRV too light.
Yes.
And therefore the jet throttle would go back too far and your sink rate would be building up on you
Too much
too much.
hysteresis.
So the technique was in coming on slow enough with your lift stick, so you didn't get this error built into it. Well, in this demo flight, Joe didn't get it on slow enough, so he weighed too low, and the auto throttle came back, and sure enough, his sink rate was at the point about 50 feet off the ground. He knew he had to abort, and Don's memory was that he needed more room. Our memory was that we had been preaching at him for weeks, ever since that we'd come out about the XB-5A, that we ought to move that local vertical switch off the left-hand console and put it up on the jet throttle, and Joe said, no, leave it alone. Don't fix it. Or, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we had this battle going on, and I can remember running up to Joe after we got it down. And of course, everybody in the crowd, they thought it was great, gave him a big hand. They didn't know the difference that he had aborted. They thought it was a normal lunar sim landing, but we all knew the difference. And as soon as I got up to shake Joe's hand, he said, change the damn switch. And we looked at the data later, and he had gone back and forth 3 or 4 times in 2 seconds, something like that. And Gene remembers looking at the human reaction time, and he was right at max.
He was right on the best that anybody could physically do.
So that, I'm glad we've got Don's lesson learned. We've also got our lesson learned in that we won the battle with him on moving that switch up to the jet throttle. So this
Also, he went higher that flight than he normally had, as I recall too,
probably did.
you know, higher altitude.
And you know, I have a picture, a photograph. I wondered the other day, did he make some practice flights?
Yes, You made 2 practice flights.
and
We have one of those.
and I have a picture, and it's with the hangars right there and in the background, and there's no people out there. So I knew it had to be a
We
practice
made 2
flight.
practice flights.
Good.
I watched it from the pilot's office up there.
Did you?
He went by,
Hadn't he gone higher than normal?
Yeah, well, that's not.
I don't remember him doing higher normal, we watched him come all the way in, and it was a slow, entry he made in, but maybe the delay of getting in the entry is what actually put him further down.
I agree with Cal, when I was watching from the ground on that sim, and I thought his first biggest problem, I didn't realize the sink rate was that bad, but he was going for the people in the buildings. And I saw the engine lock the center, and then arrested it, and I'm sure he was on the jet engine too.
Yes.
Or something,
Yeah.
but he had translation towards the people in the buildings.
Sure.
And,
I was on the ground right
yeah,
next
I
to
was
the
on the
hangar.
ground.
Watching.
That's the way I remember.
Well, I was in the control van, so I had protection. I had a motorhome over me.
Yeah, you were proud of that, yes.
Yeah, your big leather seat didn't let you fall off.
Don't bother Cal and I with that technical data you were looking at, we saw what we saw.
Well, we've got the GE people here. I've got some questions for them, Wayne.
Okay.
I'm showing that somewhere around the summer of '65, we contracted to GE to go ahead and assemble the second vehicle for us.
Yeah, really 2 phases to the thing. One of the biggest phases was incorporating all of the outstanding EOs into your drawings.
Right, Bob Chappell did that,
Bob
right?
Chappell and a whole group of draftsmen.
Okay,
And we updated all of those drawings for you. So that we could build the second one in the same configuration that
Right.
the first one was.
right.
And then we had a terrible time, you probably remember, trying to find enough parts for it.
Yes.
Because the vendors were a little upset with the government. But anyway, we finally completed that, as you know, and did a lot of the instrumentation as well. And once it was done and flying, you took number 1 out of service, and we did some more mods on that one. In other words, to
Right.
remove a lot of stuff.
Right.
At the same time, we were upgrading the engine to get you more thrust. Now, you did a heck of a good job in getting rid of the emergency rockets and the chute and everything. It gained some weight, but you still had a hot temperature problem, and we had to get some more thrust. As a matter of fact, I think we finally ended up.
Did we make 2 thrust upgrades, Doc?
Yeah, we did.
How did we,
Okay, that's,
what did we do to get the upgrade? Did
I
we
wish I
run it
could
hotter,
remember.
higher speed, or what?
No, I wish I could remember, Wayne, exactly what it was, but the data came out a limb on what we were supposed to do.
That's something I'd really like to research if we could and
I'll
pick
see if I
people's
can.
brains, because I've been thinking about it. How in the world would we have gotten an upgrade on that?
See, the original engine, you were only getting barely 4,000 pounds, if I remember right.
I always
Yeah,
thought it was
4,200.
4,200.
Yeah, but I think
4,200.
that was the first upgrade, wasn't it, to 42?
No.
But by the
Second
time,
was 44, we finally got up to.
by the time you hang a inlet on it, and
Yeah.
did we have screens or not?
No screen,
No screens?
not that I can recall. No screen.
I would have thought with all that concrete chipping away under us, we would have had screens.
Well, we were blowing it out to size.
Yeah, you're right.
But,
But screens would have cost us
oh, yeah.
another 10 degrees temperature.
You didn't want that. And then the other thing that we did was we designed and built a vertical test stand so that we could test the engines. Of course, we had to come up with another engine for the second vehicle and spares. And that worked fine. As a matter of fact, some people from Houston came out and made drawings of it, and then built another stand like it at Houston. for the
Well, we
vertical
did
test
build
stand.
an engine test stand down there. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, that engine sure served us well, and I think the reason was our duty cycle was so kind to it.
Yeah.
Typically, a jet engine's gonna run for thousands of hours, and I doubt if we put several hundred hours on the engines during the whole life of the program.
Yeah, the only
10
real
minutes
problem.
at a time max, it's kinda hard to put a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm showing we did the first mod to the engine the summer of 1965. You took serial number 1, modified, tested at GE Edwards Flight Test. delivered to NASA for installation during the last week of July of '65. Test cell performance and endurance tests were accomplished without any difficulty or engine difficulties. During test 16, starts were made, engine run for 28.13 hours, 26.15 hours in the vertical, and I'm showing that we got 4250. And the big difference was at temperature. At 100 degrees, the original engine produced 3450, and the modified engine produced 3750.
Yeah.
So it was high temperature improvement that we made. The maximum thrust at 30 degrees was basically the same.
Nothing about how we achieved
It
the
didn't say how we achieved
improved
it.
performance.
Didn't-
I'm surprised
Didn't say
because
that.
I would doubt if it's any kind of modification to the cold or hot sections, but more
No, it
more
wouldn't
to
be.
play with either RPM
Yeah.
or temperature, I would think.
That's all we wrote.
Probably RPMs.
And then the only critical thing was the loop systems you had to be able to,
Yeah.
they had to be modified for the vertical
Yeah.
operation to begin with.
So,
But you know, in the beginning, when you first, I wasn't on the program when you first started operating, but it was almost to the point where you had to sit there and burn jet fuel off to get the damn vehicle light enough to take off.
Well, we did part of that, and we
know.
also operated over a grid
Yeah, that's
inside
right,
base,
which
and that helped take some of the
That does help.
hot air away, so we didn't get the recirculation.
we also, and let's close with this story so we can go and eat lunch, Jack, so I can do the same thing to you again. And that is that we got Jack to lose some weight. He started out about 220 pounds. No, 230 pounds. Was what you weighed when we started trying to get you trimmed down to fly that thing, and our goal was 200 pounds for you. So you had to lose 30, and I wanted to lose 20. So we put our little charts together, and every Monday morning we'd weigh in on a straight line loss, and it was $1 a pound, fine, for over your straight line loss. But in the middle of this fed, we wound up in Buffalo, and the good Bell people took us out to dinner one night. While Jack was over in the restroom, I had the waitress bring every dessert in the house. And she set him down, and sure enough, he ate them all, and I made $3 that night.
Yeah, I also had one with Don down there, and we run Jack McKay in it, and Jack helped us out.
We did real well on that.
We did real well with you on
We
that.
lost our weight.
You know, that
saved our
stress
money.
facility we put in over there, you know, I was project manager on that.
There were a number of flights of that thing, when I'd sit out there sunrise, hardly come up, and I hit 100%, and it would just, wouldn't come off. Of course, we had the wheels off it then, so it would sit there, and the skids, it wouldn't drift. So I'd pull it back about 85% and let it burn off gas. Then I'd come back up with it again, and it would almost come off, so pull back, burn off. The next time, as soon as you got away from it, I don't think we're on the grid then, as soon as you got away from the ground, you're in pretty good shape. You get more cool air and on your way climbing, of course, you're burning weight all fuel off and you're on your way, but, it was a little performance limited.
You used to have to fly early in the morning up at Edwards. What happened down in Houston where the temperature is so hot down there?
Oh, the humidity made up for it. You had a lot more mass flow.
Well, you had the upgrades in engine thrust later in the program, that helped.
Well, then we got rid of the emergency rocket system, so got rid of quite a bit of weight.
I don't think we had the rockets on too long, emergency rockets. did we?
Well, no, we waited until we were almost done before we pulled them off.
Yeah,
The other
We
question-
didn't put them on the number 2 vehicle.
No, we never did put, but it only flew 6 flights,
Yeah.
but it didn't do any research. It was just built and checked out. It's about time to break up. I'd like to suggest that those that feel like a 4-block walk out to the west here on Lancaster Boulevard, if you haven't seen the Walk of Honor, there's plaques there for the local pilots that have been honored, and there'll be more later. Every year they honor about 5 new pilots, and there's bronze plaques on these things down the boulevard, so we can see quite a few of them, and they're on both sides of the street. So we'll go down to Downtown Bistro, And, if somebody isn't able to make a 4-block walk, we can take one car. But, at this age, I gotta ask. So,
How many
like,
people did you have work
standard Lancaster bull.
Think about it a little bit.
Think about that and think about who the key people were.
Mm,
I
okay.
remember you,
So-
remember Bob Chappell.
Yeah.
And then there'll be more stories.
Of course, we had Pete Palmer.
Later,
He was our
we'll talk about how I lost my
That's the
weight
kind of
in the
name
break-in
I'm looking
I got some
for.
names for
by
that.
the APs in our
The
hangar, the
draftsmen,
steel tools,
we all
and I
hired
was okay until I
Okay.
found out
Jump shoppers.
they stole all my luncheon
worked for
sticks
Ken.
out of the freezer, then I really got
The
mad.
other guy that we had that was pretty key was
That was in the middle of our week, when I was cooking
Oh, yes.
on a hibachi.
And he still is.
Yeah, that's,
Yes.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Because you include us.
Okay, turn on the recorders and off we go, and I think we might as well play the tape, so I'm gonna shut this down and save tape if we're gonna watch this movie. Joe Algrani went up at the foot of his stairway in his house the other day and looked at his picture, and I asked the same question. I said, now, how many LIM co-pilots flew it? And he come up with, who was it, Gene? Dick Gordon, I think. And he was, turned out, not a LIM co-pilot. I think he was in the
Command module.
command module. But it was only the command pilots that got the training, it turned out.
They all got some of the preliminary training, they didn't all go all the way, but the helicopter and
They may have, but as far as LLTV training, they didn't get it, according to Joe. They did
That
not
could be
fly
true.
the LLTV.
Just one guy then.
Yeah, just one guy, the command pilot only.
last 2 weeks, I know that was true.
Yeah, and he wrote, I was looking for my list, and he named every one of them off, because he had a picture of everybody that flown the LLTV.
Well, I think it's remarkable because they landed vertically standing up after all that, sitting down training. It's just remarkable that they went the way they did.
Oh,
But they were in a,
wait,
I was
what's
gonna
six?
say, they
Yeah,
were,
I know, but that.
exactly, no way.
Well, whether you're standing up and you're using a sidearm controller to do the whole thing, makes no difference whether you're standing or sitting.
Right.
You know, you can be standing because you're doing everything with your arm.
Yeah, right.
And you got support on your arm, so it won't move. So
Couldn't
standing
have
up
quite
or
done it with the
sitting
rudder
down
pedals
doesn't make
on the first configuration, though.
Right, they didn't have any rudder pedals to go, yeah.
Well, you never saw the rudder pedals, did you?
Oh, yes,
You did?
yes, sure,
Okay, you got in before we changed over to sidearm?
you bet.
Okay.
Would you control yaw by twisting the sidearm controller?
Yeah,
After we put.
well, actually, it didn't move. The first one we put in had motion. Each position had an aircraft position well with it. But then it was fixed, and it was just pressure, changing the electrical pressure on it.
For all three axes?
The
Is that
first,
recall, isn't that right?
It has some motion.
It didn't move because,
I think it has a little motion.
okay, well, we're working to get the fastest input in, and it's just the pressure rather than the movement. Takes longer
strain
to do it
gauges.
the other way,
Yeah.
so.
Well, even the F-16 sidearm controller got some motion to it. You know, all
Yeah. We flew
pressure.
several of them on a ground base simulator before we went in there for it, but I thought it still had a little bit of motion in there. I still had some, you say it was all forced?
four stick is what they used to call it.
You know, I think it's a four stick, but F-16 is a four stick too, but it moves.
They
It
have
has some
motion.
movement,
Yeah,
yeah.
they have motion, yeah.
That, floor in the original LLRV configuration with the center stick and the yaw pedals was so flimsy and sloppy that we had to rebuild it and stiffen it right after
After the
the
first
first flight.
flight.
After the first flight, we had to go in there and redesign the control linkages and stiffen the floor and get it tightened up.
Yeah, because when you push on them, you're pushing against each other.
We had sent a copy
We run out of that.
to Warren of our draft, and you've got some comments we can go over later after we adjourn, I guess, or are there comments you've got in that ought to be for the whole group? Or do you wanna do that separate with
Well, I
Gene and
didn't
Cal and I?
make any comments in that regard, just reminders primarily to me what happened.
What happened?
I didn't have any changes.
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, we got a lot to add to that, and of course, we're going through an editorial process with the historian, and by the way, after we get through with him, we've got a real tough act to follow with the editor of the book, who is a former professor from UC Irvine and Cal State New. But she's done some editing on some good books out there at NASA. They really like her, so we've agreed to use her on our book.
Good.
So hopefully we'll hand something off to Neil that he'll be proud of writing the forward. But our current problems, as Gene mentioned, we got a lot of names in there, and it's a dilemma. I talked to Gene about an idea. Maybe we can put some of the names over in the appendix and not have to have the appendice mentioned names in the index, which is what they're worried about. They're worried about having a phone book in the index. Because we're probably mentioning several hundred people in this, in terms of the roles
sure we
and
have.
this and that.
Counting everybody,
Counting
and we
everybody.
haven't gotten to the GE people yet.
Yeah, so,
The
Anyway.
only comment I might make is that some of the names probably aren't pertinent to the program. In that sense, could be deleted.
moved off into an appendix.
Well, or just delete it,
Yeah.
Just
because they weren't pertinent to the
Yeah.
program.
Warren mentioned before lunch about discussing the three ejections down at Houston. I think that would be good to get your perspective on that, and we'll tell you what we know about it, and then we'll get, as I said earlier, between Bliley and Grimm, and whoever it was that ran your accident investigation, we can sort of verify the final details with them for the sake of the accuracy.
Is Byerly available to work with you on this?
Bliley's, I've been in contact with him, and he's willing to help us.
Because he would be the one to really recall all that stuff in detail.
Now, Dean told me that he had saved 100 and some odd boxes of data, and he had the trash haulers haul them out here a while back as he'd moved them 3 or 4 times, but it was on the Mercury and Gemini and Apollo and some space shuttle stuff. But he had about 4 boxes of LLRV, LLTV data, and he couldn't throw them away. And he still got them, so he's got our name on it. So we'll work with
That'd be
him
good.
on that. Yeah. Let me just give I was down there with Neil's ejection, and I wasn't in the control van at the time, but I was there working in my office a mile or 2 away, and got the call, went down and joined Neil and sat next to him during the debriefing after he ejected. And we had, Art Gorberty has brought some telemetering data with him from that crash. He's got it with him today, and along with some other memorabilia.
I got a 16mm film that Neil sent me, I think it's 16. I got a reel of film.
You got a roll of film?
Of the whole thing.
Okay. Well, we'll,
Shows the ejection, shows the rocket.
we'll see, we've got some videotape, we've got another videotape that's got all the ejections on it. We're gonna see it the next reading. And it may cover what you've got, it may not, it may be, I saw one on, recently, just a month or 2 ago, on PBS, and they had a view from Joe Algrani's ejection, and it was a ground camera looking up, and I had never seen that view. It was very dramatic to see that looking straight up at it, and I'm anxious to find that footage, because I don't think I've got it in what you're gonna see this afternoon. But, anyway, I guess, from what we can piece together, I had Paul Belair, who worked for Bell in the, control van, working with Wiley. And, we had developed a technique, Warren, out here at Edwards to sort of really keep tabs on that lift rocket fuel, the whole peroxide fuel. And we could watch the chamber pressure on the GM and pretty well tell what you were using for lift fuel. And then the strip charts on the attitude rockets, you could sort of tell if you were using an awful lot of attitude rocket or not. And we put the two together, and Paul had advised Ron to go ahead and call Neil and tell him to get it shut off because he's getting low. And as we understand it, Ron did not get that message relayed to Neil, and I guess the thing that did him in was leaving the lift stick up and blowing all the helium overboard. Because we had designed the tanks, I don't know if you were personally responsible, but we
No.
put a standpipe in.
It was Ken's idea,
Ken
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 Levin.
Levin.
Yeah, I didn't want it that way, but he did, he wanted, he said it's just like, I think it's one of the German cars are made like that.
Is that right?
They have a standpipe, so if you run out of fuel, you twist this valve and you still have a little bit left.
Yeah.
So-
Volkswagen maybe.
Yeah.
Volkswagen had that. So that's what we did, is we put the attitude port on the bottom of the tank, and the lift rocket was on the top of the standpipe. That's the only way you could feed it.
There was like a funnel, I forgot what you call it now. There's a funnel for the main lift rockets. And once you pass that, no more, you're passing gas.
Right.
After that.
And they had about 20 pounds of peroxide in each tank, I think, to
The
have
residuals.
for the residual attitude reserve to get home onto the ground.
Right.
So when he runs out of the lift fuel, and he leaves the lift stick up, and,
There's a warning light in the tank too.
oh yeah, there's a warning light in the tank, and Wiley said he thinks the warning light did come on. But the lift stick got left up and blew all the helium over. Now,
Yeah,
Wiley seems to think that that helium went just like that. If you got the helium,
But the procedure
No,
was supposed to be, you went forward on the stick and your thumb automatically locked the gimbals. And then the next action was close it up. And then back it off, because you're lightweight and lets Ray
Yeah.
out there, but.
anyway, he wound up with no helium to get home on. He had plenty of
He had
peroxide to get
peroxide,
home
but
on.
no,
So no helium. No helium. So I. What parameters have you got on that data, Art?
Peroxide tank, left hand.
You got helium too?
That's helium.
How fast, what's the time interval? Can you tell how long it took to blow the helium down?
It's all on the panel.
It says 145 seconds. Wait a minute, no, 145 PSI. Let's see, time is about,
Because Wiley and I were arguing about that the other day.
66
Wiley was saying like it goes in a second or two. And I don't
I didn't bring a report that I wrote.
It does go in a hurry, but I don't think it goes in 1 or 2 seconds.
No, no way.
No.
No way.
I'm saying it goes a lot faster once the liquid's gone.
I think he had about 45 seconds there, he was flying and he was just,
45 seconds with the stick up?
yeah, he was
You'd
still
have to-
flying, and he kept losing attitude control. He kept losing attitude, finally, he bailed out, he had a lot of.
And the warning, on his panel, he's got H2O low
Oh,
left
yeah.
and right, and underneath it is helium source low. So
Yeah.
when they come on, they
Yeah.
had to come on before it ran out.
Now,
Well, you're
what you
right.
see on here is
Should
when
have plenty.
When he ejected,
But as I understand it,
stick
Warren,
closed.
there was a hesitancy for Wiley to call Neil and talk to him about that. And I don't,
He didn't call him.
he didn't call him, and Bel Air was after him to do it. So,
Bel Air said was the chamber pressure is coming down in the attitude controls, that's what he was monitoring.
Mhm.
He didn't pass it up.
But Neil had a light that came on when unported.
Mhm.
I
Looked like-
Yeah, oh yeah,
I think
before it unfolded, in fact,
this
it
was a-
should, but I'll tell you, we never did. This is a very important point that we wanna make here.
So,
We never would trust the warning lights, whether they were any good or not. And the reason is, they were in a peroxide tank environment, corrosive environment,
One of them was.
and a reliability question that wouldn't quit. And so we always wanted to have a backup method of determining when the pilot ought to be told to come out.
I tried to get that test run when it was on the stand, I couldn't get it run. I wanted to get it run with the thin cock, you know, in the roll position.
Oh,
just
yeah.
to see uneven tank expulsion.
But RV and TV were identical in that respect.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think
Except
we
the tank
made
was-
any changes.
The tank was bigger in the TV.
Was it?
Yeah, they made a bigger tank, and,
I've got the LLTV study reports in
I
here,
think they filled
proposal
it
and
full,
all.
of- they didn't leave as much
Yeah,
ullage
model
as we
spec.
did.
Yeah. What?
They didn't have as much ullage, you know.
Yeah.
And they filled it fuller,
Okay.
and I read this in a report somebody wrote.
Anyway, that was the story on Neil's, and I don't know, I had left the program soon after that, and so I don't recall what changes you all made that, you know, that Joe.
I gotta say there wasn't a failure, and that failure analysis never showed up before. In other words, and what they call it, FEMA failure?
FMEA.
That never appeared, that mode, failure.
FMEA, yeah, failure mode and effects analysis.
Yeah, that never showed up.
But, what do you recall about that whole Neil ejection?
I wasn't as close to it as you gents, but, all I had heard was that, it imported I thought it was the attitude rockets, but you said that, tank bottom port was the attitude rocket,
Right,
source,
on the bottom.
so it couldn't have imported first.
The story I heard was that Neil Armstrong had made up his mind that he was not going to try to land, he was going up. He had made up his mind, if he got into trouble, that's where he was going.
He wanted to go up and get a more safe altitude for ejection.
Yeah.
And as I recall, he had a pretty good ejection attitude and didn't have any problem with C, except one interesting, I don't know if you knew the story, Warren, but 20, 30 minutes after the ejection, I'm sitting next to him and he got the tape recorder on, debriefing him, and he starts listening. And he didn't have any control of his speech. And he didn't know it, but his tongue was swollen up from biting his tongue on the ejection.
Control of his speech.
Yeah. The tongue was
Supposed to keep
swollen.
your tongue in your mouth.
Anyway, he bit his tongue good, and it was affecting his speech drastically.
Really?
Yeah. But that was his only injury. I do remember that afternoon, the crane picking the smoldering mess up off the ground, and there was a snake that was half burnt and half alive, still crawling out from underneath the wreckage.
I saw an article in one of the papers, Aerospace magazine, design error. That got me right here.
I wanted to make a cartoon, never did do it, about what the snake would say when he crawled out from underneath that. What the hell did me?
Well, the Algrady incident was due to aerodynamics alone, right?
yes.
Yes.
He got into a shear layer
Yeah.
and took a gust hit of 60 knots. And that was more than enough to tip him upside down.
And I understand he had both, the main attitude control and the backup going at the same time.
Well, after they landed, Alan King, I saw him in New Orleans back in March, and I was getting his version of the story, and he says that we remember looking out Pasadena to a power plant smokestack, and this was after the accident, and he said that black smoke was coming up and going up to whatever altitude it was that Joe was at, and then he says it turned and took off horizontal. He said it was a perfectly visible sign of that wind shear and right where it was.
They showed the balloon test before flight, so they must have.
That was after Joe's. What you saw with the boom way out, that was all done. That was something else they found, that the anemometer on the roof,
Yeah.
when he was pitched up, getting ready, that he actually was getting a low reading
Blanked off.
because it was blanked off.
Yeah.
So they put that boom out there.
What do we have on the RV? We had the low speed PO, didn't we?
We started off with one, or talked about it, and quickly took it off because it wasn't accurate. Went to the anemometer.
We went to an
instead.
anemometer, and I remember it was not part of the LLTV original model spec. And I remember by that time I was wearing a Bell hat, and I went down with Riken, and I told Al Grande this. I said, Joe, we were down there with you and several others, and Riken and I were given the pitch to what the cost would be to add anemometers and wind vanes to the LLTV. And that was sort of after the fact, and all Joe could think was how many Cadillacs that was equivalent to what we were gonna charge NASA. And he was, and then Joe got in the other day to tell me about an experience he had with Boeing on some changes they were gonna do on, I think it was the shuttle carrier.
There was an anemometer on the TV.
Well, not originally, but we put it on. So Houston came back to us on the LLTV and said, let's put those anemometers on. So we had to go down and make a pitch on what the cost was.
Boom.
And it was
Really didn't work perfect.
from a layman's standpoint, but by the time we crank it through, it was good. Quality and all that. If you remember, we had a few problems with inspection in those.
Very rarely.
You know, the anemometer didn't fly on the limb.
No.
Doesn't work very well in a vacuum.
Doesn't work very well.
Hey, that raises a question.
Yeah.
Raises a question. Vacuum.
Yeah, there you go.
What is the vacuum on the moon? Is it a hard vacuum?
As far as I know.
Okay. That question was asked by
Dill Hunley,
You know,
the
pressure suits,
historian.
the
He says, is it a
history.
partial vacuum or is it
Pressure
an
suits
absolute vacuum?
equal pressure on the moon with the
Okay. That's what I thought, but I
Vacuum tube.
didn't know the answer for sure.
So it's an absolute vacuum.
Wayne, look where that is on number 2. It could be pitched up 60 degrees and still be operating.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, but I've had several occasions to ask astronauts, I guess, various questions about what it's like on the moon, and I don't know why. Must be a big top secret or something, but I always got no answer or evasive answers. Like the question he just asked.
Mm-hmm.
Or how cold is it, you know, when you step out of the limb? It's cold, you know. Never get a straight answer.
In the pressure suit, you wouldn't feel it.
I know that, but you know, it's a curious question. How cold is it up there?
Yeah, but if you don't have any atmosphere, how are you gonna take the temperature?
Oh, boy.
You mean the thermometer don't work up there?
I said, look at how young Gene is in that picture, and he
Cold
looked
is
up
cold.
at you and said,
I know it changes from daytime to nighttime.
But you gotta have some atmosphere for a thermometer to work.
Well, there must be other kinds of metering devices which can tell you that.
Well, you know, on the moon, if you're broadside down sun, it's 200 degrees Fahrenheit plus. On the black side, it's minus 200.
That's what
So
I
we
was
picked
saying.
the landing site near the break point, so it'd be half dark and half cold.
But it was
If
always,
you've ever been to Alaska, when it gets down to minus 30 to minus 65, it's damn cold.
The same thing in North Dakota.
Yeah, right. It's just like cold.
yeah. Yeah, I had the opportunity to experience some of that in the hangar down in Florida there,
In the,
climatic hangar.
What happened on Stu's accident, we covered the first two.
I always thought that we missed something in the failure modes and effects analysis on the LLTV regarding Stu's accident, because what he had was a main DC generator failure on the engine. And it wouldn't switch over to the emergency bus. And Gene thought it was because it was a solid state circuitry on
We had an
the
analog
switchover.
sensing system
And
on
we had
the
an
RV,
analog system.
and they went to digital on the TV.
However,
That's what I'd heard.
Graham tells me that the real culprit was the fact that GE had sold him a upgrade on the generator. It was a beefed up, more heavy duty type of generator. And they went ahead and bought it and put it on there, but they had this failure, and unbeknownst to them, the new upgrade carried a high residual magnetic field in the failure mode. And that residual magnetic field was what kept the switchover circuitry from putting you on the emergency bus. And what I was told was that it didn't take them too long to diagnose what the problem was, because what happened after he ejected, couldn't get in the emergency bus, so he lost control, okay? Well, the rocket put the engine out, flamed it out, and as soon as the RPMs went down on the engine, it got the field released, and the switchover came in, and that sucker went right straight in, straight from the attitude rocket system worked good. And so they had enough TM data and film to figure that one out within about a half hour after the crash. So I guess, I still think the failure modes and effect analysis had it identified it being as a sensitive area, could have driven them. Had they paid attention to it when they bought an upgrade, then they might have tested and prevented it, but it's a long shot. I think we're awfully fortunate that we never had a jet engine failure, GE.
Yeah.
Again, I think even in tribute to the life cycle of the engine and what little tiny bit we used out of it.
That's true, but you know, you can get a failure on your first operation.
You get an infant failure, that's for sure.
Damn near every VTOL that has ever flown has lost an airplane because of an engine failure. And this engine was absolutely impeccable in terms of reliability.
You know, I don't know.
Never seen better
Basically a
engine.
J85 to begin with, you know, with just
Understand.
a fan stuck on the back, and so they had lots and lots of experience on it.
This is the first vertical application though, Doc.
Yeah, I understand.
Well,
Was
the
it the first
J85
one?
wasn't all that reliable at first either.
No, not in the beginning, but I'm saying by the time we built the CF700, it had pretty good reliability.
Yeah, I know I used to fly the early T-38s with those things, and we had a lot of failures. And particularly at altitude, the engines would quit on you quite often.
We never got high enough, Liz.
No, but I'm talking about the basic J85 engine.
Ooh, we gotta talk about that a minute. Gene, what's the altitude record for the LLRV?
I seem to recall Jack getting up to somewhere near 10,000 feet.
Really?
Okay? Now,
You gotta be kidding me. 10,000
Must be
feet?
a joke.
Is that right or not?
I don't,
we finally
the
found.
answer is I don't know.
Okay.
We finally found a crack here, but if we stop and do some calculations.
See if you have enough fuel to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
and
I remember you got god awful high because
Well,
you were
2,000 feet looks
just-
awful.
Yeah, we
just
were
a
way up
speck
there,
in the
right.
sky. And it would seem like an eternity to get you back down
How
on the
high
ground
do you
again.
think you went?
I don't think I've ever been above 2,000.
I don't think you ever were, Don, but we've
Well,
got a
that's
crazy
special,
Army
that.
pilot here that one of
Yeah,
those.
you gotta watch those.
We used to work at
Prove some
elevations
things.
around 800 to 1,000 to stay below traffic. plus-
How will we ever figure that one out? What's the altitude record for the LLRV? Gonna have to put you under Jack and do a
Don't
what do you
think,
call it?
we'll just
Hypnotic-
ignore that fact.
Hypnotic
No, I
state.
think we were trying to get to all the different ones, the speed, the whole envelope opened up. And I did go up in altitude, whether I got to 10,000, I don't know. 10,000 sounds like a lot.
Now, you wouldn't have gone to a high end of the envelope without doing at least a little calculation
Oh,
on it.
certainly.
You got that envelope with you?
Well, if you had time, you know, the jet engine doesn't burn much more of it, any difference there. How many minutes did we have? We had 10 minutes worth, and I think I got 9:40 or something.
Well, I don't think you would have burned much rocket fuel just to gain altitude,
Oh,
because
you
you
wouldn't
want
burn
to
any,
save that.
you'd be
This
going all
was,
the way
this was
on
strictly on the jet engine,
JP4.
yeah,
Well, his gimbal's locked the whole time,
right.
All right.
so then you could go by time.
How much jet fuel did you have?
400 pounds, that's all.
No, I mean, time was with fuel consumption, what does that add up to?
What is our SFC, Doc?
Jeez, I don't know.
.7?
We operated on
I
10
don't know
minutes,
anymore.
so we were up.
I guess it was closer to 1 in those days.
Do you remember, Don, what limits
Half
we had
an
in the book was 10?
Well, yeah,
10
we had
minutes
10
on
minutes.
JP4.
Oh, 10 minutes on the flight?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it was, I think.
that's what we had,
No, it's,
stay below 10 minutes and we're supposed to be okay.
Well, what would you bet your rate of climb that you're gonna use?
I
Pretty
know I should
decent.
have my handbook here.
You want me to get the LLTV handbook?
Yeah,
It wouldn't be any different, would it?
I don't think so. Well,
You
yeah,
should've
it
had a
makes
bigger
it
tank.
different, cause you'd be different weights, you get different tanks, yeah. So you could go longer with the TV.
Oh, the TV wasn't that much different than the RV
Well,
one.
200 pounds, you said they made the tank bigger.
No, well, that was the peroxide.
Peroxide tank.
You don't know
JP
anything
from-
about the JP.
I don't know, but
about
it
the
was,
process.
it was above 5, but I don't remember where it was.
Okay,
You think it was over 5,000
No,
feet?
over 5,000? I probably would've got it and come right back through,
that's exactly what we did.
cause we gotta get down, that was the whole purpose of the flight, get up.
Well, we can
come
work
back
on
down.
that.
We can run some
I was
calculations.
gonna say, what were you testing that day, what were you looking for, just altitude or?
Yeah, we just, as Jack says, just,
Open up the envelope.
Oh, okay.
Well, I got a couple other things in mind before we run out of time. We got one
We
more,
did
we wanna
speed.
see the ejections on the video, and so we got one more video to run. And I got a bunch more to go, another 24 hours on video in there, but we're not gonna have time.
another question that we really ought to answer, and I don't know who can give us the best guess at that, maybe Ray. When did the Dynelectron people show up? The maintenance people, do you remember?
You mean in terms of months or
Yeah,
years?
yeah,
or
roughly what time of year did they show up? 'Cause I
Brian said
remember-
he was supposed to send them out for 3 months and they stayed for 6. They stayed twice as long as they
Sounds
planned
good.
on it. But we'll find out exactly when they come. Bliley will get that
Okay.
information, cause he came out with them,
Yes?
Yeah.
so we'll get that from Bliley.
And I can tell you one thing, we took some photographs. And it had to be summertime of 1960, well, I don't know, 65 or 66. But we took a picture of you in the LLRV, we took a picture of me in the LLRV, and we took a picture of Bliley in the LLRV.
Well, that would have been before I left in June of 66.
You know, Joe was killed in summer of
June of 66, first day of work at Bell, he was killed.
So we need to identify when the Dynelectron people showed up. And again, some of the key Dynelectron people, other than Bliley, I don't remember anybody's name. And we probably should recognize some of those people.
While I'm setting up the next tape, Tom from NASA said Duke wanted the signature of Jack, you and Don right along up here somewhere with Neil's. And, I don't know, Gene, you wanna help them figure out where you want them to sign that?
Figure one, they just sign them on a horizontal line, spread out. Somebody
Spread
sign
out across,
on the right-hand side,
and then that'll be.
opposite Neil's, and then somebody sign in the middle.
And I suggested to him, I said, I've got Joe Walker's signature on an LLRV here, we can lift it off of the computer and put it on there. That's cheating. But anyway, that'd be nice if we can get you to sign it. Now, the other thing I wanna tell you, on the back table is on a big flat, are a bunch of copies of this poster.
Oh,
And, you all get one, and if you want Jack and Don to sign them, well, I'm sure they'll be glad to sign them back there on that table. They're turned over on the back back side of this poster is a bunch of other stuff, and that's the side that's up over there, so you can just grab those and sign a bunch of them. If you don't mind signing a few for those that didn't make it, and sign the whole stack, then we'll have those.
You wouldn't have to
signatures.
have any of those that's 8x10 or 11x14 or anything like that?
I don't, not yet.
Oh, okay.
What do you think of the tile mural?
I think it's terrific. We need a photograph.
Did you see that?
Oh, yeah.
We'll get some photographs of that.
Well, it's made with ceramic tile?
Yeah, that's on regular ceramic tile.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Who did that?
I did the scanning of all the individual pictures and sent them up on a CD overnight
I never even
last
noticed that.
Friday, I think, to my son, who's a contractor north of San Francisco, and so he did all the graphic composition of that. And then his printer broke, so his younger brother has the same outfit press and everything else, so he made the tiles, and it came in this morning about 10 o'clock FedEx. It was still curing at noon and gassing off from the sublimation dye ink process going into the tile. It's a high temp hydraulic press operation. But he sent one sample along of what it looks like on a
There's one, it's over here.
yeah, I'll just pass this around. This is what it looks like on a square footer. And I don't know exactly what the costs are, but if people want these, we can probably get a decent price, and they could be framed. And I didn't think that would look very good on just one tile, but it came out better than I thought. And I can get a price, including a frame around it, so it's ready to hang on a wall. And,
Thank you very much.
so I'll get this other tape ready, and I just didn't want you to forget the poster business.
Good idea.
You mentioned street presence. North of Farm and 38.
Yeah, that was,
We were doing LLRV work, I think, on P38.
it was the last project report.
Right at the end of the Scott DFP.
Yeah, right, you had the one before that,
What caused the accident?
Flew under some
number
low
40.
clouds that you thought he was the elevator.
The last one you
on the
had
deck.
was number 38, so there's one in between that we don't have.
Was somebody with him?
But the idea was to summarize.
I think you asked him what was
program.
in.
Was it after the other guy get killed too? I thought Stu was by himself.
It wasn't astronaut, it was whatever, flight research or engineers.
Huh. I'll never forget the story that Jack McKee told. He's flying over the Gulf in formation,
Yeah,
and
we
I can't remember who he was flying,
what this was going to be beforehand.
8 or probably a TBM or something. Anyway, they would try to go into the clouds, got lower, lost the horizon, and ended up Jack flew into the water. And he got out of the airplane and tread the water,
Did you
and
ever find those,
just about ready to go
forms
under,
that
and
we were
all
talking
of a sudden
about?
his feet touched the bottom.
Removals and,
Oh, Lila's supposed to be looking for it.
So he tread the water in about 5 feet of water. And then he walked about a half mile to the shore.
Silly feeling, huh?
He wasn't the pilot with you.
Pardon?
Jack McKee.
No, Jack McKay.
Okay.
He told the story about the PBY pilot warring up in Alaska in World War II. He was flying to get into a whiteout and come off the ocean over a cliff and snow, and he just was slowing down and adding power and adding power. He's sitting there at full power, and the crew chief thought, well, here we are, and he got out the blister, and he went around the side. He's giving the pilot a cut. The pilot's up there landing on.
Another cool pilot. Reminds me of that cool pilot flying test flights out of George Air Force Base, over by Apple Valley. Takes off in his F-100, climbing out and the engine quits. So he switches back over to tower brakes and turns the airplane back and calls George Tarsus, this Air Force 1234, I just lost my Apple over engine valley.
this Navy guy was out at night off the coast, and both of them flamed out. And I guess he had a battery in partial panel, and he shot a dead stick with the lights that are sitting on the clouds, because it was overcast. I think he broke out at about 6,000 to 7,000 feet, and he made Mayport. He got that damn thing down Mayport, never scratched it. I thought, now there's a cool cat. I think I've been out there swimming with a life raft.
That cutlass took all our guys down with it. He was very unreliable airboat.
Control rods and cables on the controls.
Jack, if you recall, this was the only flight we ever
F-16,
flew
I'm sure bought
open loop.
on a few farms, all electric.
You test broken ground and we said
Last 6
something's
months.
wrong, cause the attitude
2.5.
rockets
Was that
aren't
right?
firing the way that they should fire. And we called you and
Well,
immediately
mail
identified
out,
the fact that you didn't have any.
Engine clips
Feedback.
and controls clips.
Yep, yeah, I remember that.
Remember that?
Right, sure.
It takes a little extra expertise.
Yes, it's unstable airplane. But he's used to flying helicopters, so that wasn't,
I'm used to being a good damn.
Right. right.
Anti, what was it? Gauzy control, right, but that one was. How they say
Some of this may be a repeat, so I'm gonna fast forward it if the remote will go through. There we go, it will. What I'm looking for is whoops, there's one, that's the same ejection seat test we saw on the others. And this is not as good I don't think this is SVHS, it looks pretty grainy.
He didn't do any.
Okay.
So he was.
This doesn't,
It's after it's
have you
separated.
seen this footage on the other shot?
It was not powered, it was tumbling.
This is all the other, you sure it's that thing either?
I'm gonna pull it out of here, I think it is the same one.
Looks like the
Sure
same
looks
one.
like it.